Squeaky table. Imagine if we get copyright strikes for a song because of the squeaky table. Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. We're revisiting something because I thought this was interesting enough to talk about. Now, we're kind of spoilt for choice with small form factor cases these days, but that wasn't the case back in 2015 when the Cougar QBX hit the shelves. Now, this is one of my favorite small form factor cases. Well, it was up until we had all of these options. So I wanted to find out if this case from Cougar was still worth looking at in 2021. And yeah, so let's do it. I've got a few of these cases and we've done plenty of content around them and we've seen heaps of cool mods that you guys have made with like mesh fronts and whatnot, but I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to look at it in its stock form to see if it still holds up in 2021 compared to things like the NR200 and just any other ITX case. And now it's not a direct comparison with those cases because I feel like there's just would be too much to cover in a single video, but I wanted to build in it and then talk about how it is to build in compared to newer things. So like how they've evolved these small form factor cases over time. So first, I guess we need to build in it and then we'll chat about a bunch of things and then I've got something very, very special to show you. What do you reckon, Bindi? She's already given it a sniff down on the floor, but let's jump in and build. Ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed this newer-ish hardware build in the Cougar QBX. The reason why I chose hardware like this is because this is kind of the same hardware we've been using for small form factor builds, so I could personally get an idea of how this thing thermally performs. And let's take a look at those thermals, just so you can get an idea of all of that. The thermal performance isn't too bad for a case like this. Now, I thought it was going to be a lot worse considering like we've had a lot of newer options with cases like this. There's a couple things that we couldn't do, which I'm going to mention a little bit later in the video as well, but thermally, I think this is actually not too bad. I did play around with putting the fans in exhaust and in intake as well, and to exhaust out the side for the 240mm AIO actually worked out to be slightly better overall. So realistically, I would say that you could choose whichever one you like. But again, always take into account the hardware that is being used in a system like this. So this CPU typically doesn't get too hot, and 240mm AIO for much higher TDP CPUs might not be ideal in this case, but with something like a 6-core CPU and a 3070, I think the thermals are actually not too bad at all. So that's kind of how this stacks up thermally. But what about building in it? Well, there's a couple things that I noticed with newer hardware that we didn't have problems with in previous generations. Now, with 20 series cards, there was a bit of fluctuation between thickness of cards, and it's not an exact science when it comes to GPU height, right? So something will say it's 2.5 slots where it's actually 2.68 slots or whatnot. So the sizing there differentiates. So when I initially eyeballed up with this GPU in particular, and I've got a clip where I'm going to show this as well, I was going to put intake fans underneath it. Now I'm not doing any deshrouding stuff. I've already showed that, most of the time deshrouding is a waste of time. This clip here, as you're seeing, although we can fit that 12.5mm fan from Noctua underneath the GPU, I cannot get it to line up with the slot properly. Even forcing it and trying to kind of maneuver it to get in there, it just doesn't work. So that idea was out the window. Now there's a few other things that I would like to have done on this case with this build in particular, there's a 92mm fan mount at the front of the case, so there's one at the back and it comes with that fan at the back, but intaking at the front, I don't have any 92mm fans, and I seriously think that I need to go and buy a stack of them so we can fit them in smaller builds like this. I don't know why I don't have 92mm fans. They are quite an odd size. I think they were always a really odd size. 80mm or 120 back in the day was traditionally the size, but 92 was always quite weird, so there's that. For the exhaust on the top, I managed to fit a slim 12.5mm Noctua fan up there anyway. And from the testing that I've done previously, I found that that is actually quite a viable solution for exhausting out the top. Now, don't let this plastic cover on the top fool you too much, because it actually is quite adequate for exhaust. For intake, maybe not so much, but for exhaust, I have found in the past that it did work. Now, as far as mounting 240mm AIOs, this is something that I've covered in other Cougar QBX content in the past. Was a lot of the time people were like, how are you able to mount a 240mm AIO with both fans and not a single fan like on Cougar's website? The trick is using an SFX power supply with an adapter bracket, because this case does support full-size ATX power supplies. However, I found that, for thermal purposes, it is better to use an SFX power supply with an adapter bracket. That's just the findings that I've had over many years of tinkering around with this case, and I thought to myself, there's so many new small form factor cases, it just makes sense to take one more look at this when we compare it to other small form factor cases. Does that make sense? Which leads me into the next thing, the size of this compared to other small form factor cases. So, yes, ladies and gents, I have all 4 of these in every color already. Yes, they were only just announced. Yes, we knew about them way before they were announced, and yes, we have all 4 already. Anyway, besides the point, if we do this side by side, we can see that the Cougar QBX is actually quite similar in size to the NR200. Although the NR200 has heaps of other things going for it, like its capacity to fit bigger GPUs, mounting fans at the top of the case. You can do a 280mm AIO on the side. I'll see if I can do a side-by-side this way, and if it still fits into the frame. Yeah, we should be okay. So you can see that, relative to size, and I'm trying to do this on the same axis so it doesn't skew it at all, but they're very, very similar in overall size. But if I had to pick one of these, and this is based on pricing alone, the Cougar QBX fluctuates in price quite a bit. So right now in Australia, I saw it's about $90. Every time I've bought one of these, because I own 2 of these, I've paid around 70 to 75 Australian dollars. I think the original one that I bought was 65 Australian dollars. So with everything going on in the world right now, the prices are fluctuating for these cases quite a bit. So, realistically, which one would I choose out of these two cases if I was given the choice based on, you know, cooling capacity, efficiency, and what I could physically fit in the case, right? I think for the price, if you can get the QBX at a good price and you're not looking to put crazy hot hardware in it, I still think that the Cougar QBX in 2021 is a viable option to look at. Now, there's a whole modding scene with these cases as well, and we've got a couple people in our Discord who have done things like they've done mesh fronts, they've cut out the bracket on the side for the AIO to remove that mesh pattern that it's got for the AIO mounting just for a bit more airflow. And there's people who have made complete mesh tops and just heaps of cool mods for these as well. So I think that if you're looking at modding a case, the QBX can also be quite a good option for that. But in terms of price to performance and what you're getting, the non-P version, just the NR200 without the TG, I think is a bit of a banger still. So, you know, I always say, oh, I'm not gonna cover anything with the NR200 again, or like, oh, I'm not gonna be doing that again, but it just comes back to how well thought out this case. Now, this isn't a promo for this case or anything. Don't get that twisted at all. I'm just using it as comparison because it's the only small form factor case I've got like access to right now. Everything else is in storage, and you know, for this video it's hard to pull out 50 boxes to find another case. So these just arrived yesterday and I was like, yeah, we should probably, you know, talk about this in comparison, because this video has been planned for quite a while. I actually filmed this video, like the building part and everything, 2 days ago, and I was like, you know what, let's hold out so we can talk about it with an NR200 and whatnot. I use this hardware and these parts purely just to, you know, to test out this thing. It's not supposed to be the most beautiful build in the world. And the great thing with cases like this is a lot of the time, I hate to say it, but the cable management doesn't matter too much as long as all the hardware fits in its small form factor. So yeah, let us know what you think of the Cougar QBX in 2021. Let us know if you're still using this case. I'm pretty curious to see, because I still talk to a lot of people who absolutely love this case. We still get comments every day on our QBX videos with people saying that they love this thing, that it's, you know, it's really hard to go to something else. So yeah, let me know if you're one of those people who are still using a QBX. I'd be very curious to hear from you. And if you've got any ideas for some mods that we should do to this case to make it a bit better, and I know that like we've had those over the time of doing QBX content, but I'd like to condense it into the comments of this so I can get some ideas, because I want to do something really cool with this QBX. I've got 2 of them. One of them I'm going to keep in pristine condition, and one of them I want to absolutely mod the heck out of so we can do some cool stuff. Now, obviously I didn't talk about all the parts. I'll put a PC part picker list down below in the description if you're curious to know what all the parts are, but roughly 11600K, 3070, and a 240mm AIO. A lot of that stuff is not really that important as it being a build. I was just wanting to test it and just give it a little bit of a run. So if you guys like videos like this where I revisit older cases, especially this one. This one's going on about 6 years old now. Let us know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. You guys are awesome. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peek, we seek. And I suppose we should do a little bit of cinematic stuff at the end. It's not a very pretty build, but let's do something pretty for you guys anyway. Thanks for watching.